Hi, everyone, and happy to meet you here again. Today, I'm with Oisín from Obol, and we're going to have a pretty interesting chat about Obol Claw, the new interesting stack that they dropped. Let's start with some intro first. Why don't you start?
Sweet. Happy to be here. So my name is Oisín. I'm CTO and co-founder at Obol. My background has been working in Ethereum for 7 or 8 years now, first starting out in Consensus. And most people know Obol for our work on distributed validators. We make Ethereum validators that are run by groups. And at the moment, something in the region of 1.5 billion and 2% of stake run on these multi-operator distributed validators.
Nice. Hey, I'm Saj. I lead product at Optimum. We're building peer-to-peer gossiping protocol for powering the globally distributed blockchain networks, starting with Ethereum. And I guess today what I'm mostly interested in is understanding this intersection that Obol Claw sits on top of between the blockchain ecosystem, specifically Ethereum, who's been very much at the forefront of this effort, and the agentic space. So I think you touched on the mission of Obol. It's been a key player for a while in the ecosystem, building very strong software that is adopted. Do you have some notion of just metrics for us, like with who you're working on at this stage?
Sure. So at the moment, some of the biggest adopters of Obol are the liquid staking protocols. Lido, EtherFi, and Alluvial all run a reasonably significant amount of their stake on distributed validators, some with single entities running them and sometimes some with groups. But yeah, I certainly am keen to, I don't know, a chat at some point about like how we go from this, like why Obol Claw, or how did you get there from validators and stuff. I don't know, we just
that was going to be my question, right? I mean, I can see the sort of transition, but what prompted you to go into that? I know the Openclaw frenzy took everyone sort of by surprise a couple of weeks ago, but yeah, what's the story?
For sure. So over the last, like Obol was started in mid 2021, and we put our first validator on mainnet at the end of 2022. So we're north of 3 years in production now, growing the amount of people running nodes. And over the time, we've had a lot of fun trying to get different people from the like super big enterprises to the like, first time people touching a terminal groups, trying to get them involved in running distributed validators, and particularly in groups, which is kind of takes the pressure down a little. They can, run with their friends. And if your node fails, it's not the end of the world. Your other 3 friends will keep it online and you can fix it at the weekend or whatever.
Right.
We first did a lot of our tooling in Docker Compose, which for most people, I assume that are listening to something like this kind of knows what it's about. But one of the problems we had was that it isn't the most powerful when you want to do really fancy automation. You want to do some setup scripts. You want to have something that like creates infrastructure on demand. You want, you really started to kind of outgrow it, even just from a simple thing of when people got up and running, they were like, cool, I'm running one distributed validator. I want to join another. I want to join a third. I want to set up this like auto accept kind of type of setting. So we were, starting to, you might say, outgrow Docker Compose for certain setups. And the kind of common enterprise software for when you really want to provision software at scale is a thing called Kubernetes, originally built by Google. This is, I don't know, the big brother to running like Docker containers, and it has a lot like more power. So about a year ago, maybe a bit more, we started working on the Obol stack, which is going to be our successor to our like Docker Compose setups for running validators. And we, even then, that was, the kind of chat GPT era of AI where people were still kind of, asking questions of AI like it was Google. But we knew that like directionally speaking, this was probably going to be important when it came to debugging people's nodes. Reading logs yourself and figuring out the issues, like manually going through the docs, was kind of on the way down, and people were closer to just asking ChatGPT, like, how do I fix my node?
Right.
So we built the Obol stack. It is a Kubernetes on your host type of setup. And, some of the key things it like does out of the box is it sets you up with a load balanced Ethereum node. So you can have either just something light on your machine that uses a remote or PC. And then with kind of one extra command, you can run a local Ethereum full node. So you can kind of have it all running locally. And originally we were working with an AI agent. Well, it's probably pre-agent. We were using Google's kind of LLMs, and you could talk to it and you could then ask it questions. It could read logs. It could help you debug, but it wasn't, where we're at with the kind of the Openclaw type of explosion, as you called it, which is, I think, the kind of next phase of AI adoption for the world, where instead of this world where you kind of ask an AI something and it gives you back a message, we had this kind of interim with the Claude codes of the world where they can, run commands and they can like do, more sophisticated things than just giving you an answer. And then Openclaw can run 24/7 and it can check things and decide, should I wake up and begin to like interact, do something
Yeah,
like
it can do things.
Exactly. And I could do things without you telling it to. So that was kind of pretty evidently the direction we wanted to go, because if your node breaks, we don't really want you to notice your own node breaks, go to your computer, log on and be like, hey, AI, fix it. You probably just want your AI to be like, something's wrong here. Let me try and restart the node. Let me try and, clear down logs, free up a bit of disk space, things like that. So that was very much the direction and rationale for why Obol Stack, why AI within the Obol Stack, and then kind of why Openclaw. And then at today's date and kind of like looking forward, we're also trying to see like, well, what else can you do if you give an Openclaw agent an Ethereum node, you give it a wallet, you give it the ability to pay for stuff with X402 or to sell stuff with X402. And that's what has us, I don't know, working long days at the moment and like shipping in a frenzy like everybody else in the space, and just trying to really, as we alluded to, like Obol's mission is to power and secure the Ethereum economy. So we kind of secure Ethereum through our distributed validators, which help, keep Ethereum decentralized. And then to power the economy, building this Obol stack, helping more people run nodes, serve RPCs, interact with all of the on-chain like ecosystem that's out there. That's kind of how we see the Obol Claw type of whole situation fitting into our mission.
Yeah, so it's kind of like a logical next step in your journey, which was, mostly focused on automation and like the sort of setup and ops, and then how do we make that easier? How do we automate some more? And then leveraging LLM. And now with this new framework, in a way, a lot of that was already there, but probably the mental model has shifted a bit. And I wanted to ask you, why specifically Openclaw, and are you looking at other frameworks, maybe?
We are keeping an eye on other frameworks for sure. I think Openclaw mostly took the world by storm and really had that kind of hard takeoff of adoption and like ecosystem around it. I think that's the very compelling argument still for why Openclaw over like some of the alternatives. The amount of skills that you can give to your Openclaw agents to kind of allow them to do more and more things. It felt pretty hard for me to say, should we do something different or should we kind of go with the flow? So it's like, yeah, let's go with the Openclaw flow. Do I think it'll be the only agent framework we use? Probably not. I think people like choice. I think there will be kind of more out there. There's already kind of ones out there that are kind of competing with it. So I can imagine that we can be pretty, open-minded about which framework people want to drop into their stack. If they have one that, works better for their use case, I do imagine that that'll be fairly doable. The upside of Kubernetes, you can install it with kind of a one-line command if you know what you're doing.
Yeah, and I saw that you published actually several skills, some pretty powerful one too. Do they all require Obol stack, or are they, leverageable, let's say, by other Openclaw agents in a different stack?
Not necessarily. I have yet to tweet and publish the variant that is non-Obol stack, but they will be probably even by the time that this goes out already available. So if you have a separate agent, you can like install them. There's kind of a weird standards issue at the moment where all of the different agents and frameworks have slightly different standards of skills. I think that will get kind of sorted out in the coming weeks. But right now, a skill for an Openclaw agent isn't quite the same as a Claude Code skill, isn't quite the same as like an OpenAI skill. So we've been working with a lot of them, particularly both kind of in-house for the kind of core team to do with like to facilitate their development. And then we have the ones for, Openclaw agents. And then we have some others in the middle for customers who have their own Claude code that want to maybe debug their stack, but in their own setup, that haven't, maybe migrated across to the Obol stack yet. So,
Right.
and short answer is, yeah, we've skills of all sorts kind of coming out quickly.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And I mean, this makes me think of what you mentioned regarding the agent economy and around standards. So, looking at the Web3 side of thing, we have ARC 8004. We mentioned earlier on the payment X402, HTTP native payments. What is your take on that, and what it could unlock for agents in the Ethereum space or Web3 space in general?
Yeah. So I think the thing that really stands out to me as someone a long time in the crypto space, trying to figure out how we could get people more using crypto than using maybe traditional payments, is when you see agents try and like bootstrap. If they are trying to use something in the traditional world, they can't get a debit card or a credit card, but they can create a wallet trivially, and you can give them some crypto pretty easily too. So crypto in general has been a great base framework for these tools to get started with. And then X402 certainly seems like an interesting way to gate certain kind of web resources by micropayments. I don't know if it'll be the only standard, like not everything in the world works on micropayments. Maybe the world will kind of change from a very subscription heavy model that we're in now to a more usage based micropayment world. But it is kind of the first thing in the space that allows people to restrict certain kind of assets, websites, and locations with like micropayments. When we had kind of debit card payments, the like fees for a minimum transaction are much too high for that to be scalable. But hopefully with Ethereum layer twos, lots of different cryptography, we can get the cost of these micropayments down low enough that they kind of scale. And in general, just I do think open source, 24/7, always on smart contract based systems are the most viable thing for an agent to use when they want to get fancy with payments.
Right. Yeah. So transaction costs go down and TPS goes up, I guess, is what would best serve an agent economy. So I guess something that I was curious about is there is, we mentioned that maybe agents are actually the end user, for blockchains. I thought that was an interesting concept. That what we've built so far in Web3 is actually better suited for machines. What's your take on that? I think I saw it mentioned as well in a Obol blog post.
For sure. I think that is definitely something I'm coming to grips with. And I think a lot of people are coming to grips with at the moment when it comes to, who your future user is for a lot of type of services. But I do think, as someone I know you have been in the space about as long as I have, but the like interacting with complex DeFi or transactions is very arduous and kind of hasn't really gotten as easy as we wanted. This unlock of being able to express what you want in like natural language and have an LLM figure out what you mean, confirm, do all the safety checks, see if it needs to do anything like that, and then craft a complex transaction is a massive UX unlock, and maybe the one that I think we needed when it comes to figuring out how we get mass adoption on chain. We're not really in a world where everyone's going to kind of self-custody their private key and use hardware wallets. But I do think, my parents will quite happily like transact with an LLM and not really know the cryptos, running underneath it. So yeah, I think
That's the
it's
key, right? For adoption. Most of the big platform rely on, tech stack that most people don't understand. Even, we often say the internet itself, but it doesn't prevent people from running social media businesses and having like millions of followers and building successful services or products thanks to their presence. Yet they do not need to understand the specifics of the actual protocol and stack that they're using. So this shift to an intent based way of interacting with blockchains and Web3 services in general might be the missing piece to unlocking the power of the system that we've been building, as you said, for quite a while now, Ethereum, and even further, I think of Bitcoin. Yeah, so this does bring the question of security. I guess it's kind of like scary to think of agents having that much power and, just reasoning and acting at a finer, granularity of time than humans. So, like, how do you stop them? What if, like, there is some cascade of, catastrophic series of actions that are taken, and there's real, money at stake or real impact on something. So, how are you thinking about that?
Yeah. In the early days, and like in all of our docs, when people kind of read the release notes and stuff, we say, like, take it easy, don't give your agent more money than you're willing to lose. I think that kind of generally is a pretty good, thing to keep in mind when you're playing with kind of early technology. I think more practically, as we look towards, how is this going to work at scale? I think it comes to multi-sigs, and more specifically like smart contract multi-sigs, because you can have much more sophisticated rules inside of a programmable smart contract multi-signature wallet versus one that's, purely cryptography. You're, purely cryptography, 2 of 3, you need your agent and you to sign it. That maybe is a bit limited, but instead, if you can say, oh yeah, agent, you can have this much of an allowance for gas money, and you can do interactions with these whitelisted contracts without my permission because I'm not worried that you can mess it up. You can have a small little wallet of your own for pocket money, but if I'm moving any of my like personal crypto or something, it's in a multi-sig, and as an agent, you're maybe proposing what the person will click on to like approve. But that's really how I see big value sums being used if an agent is kind of acting on your behalf, if it's staging transactions in your wallet, and then it has its own pocket money too.
So on the topic of latency, actually, if we push the boundary even further, lots of new agents and bots use cases have to do with trading strategies. I'm curious about the type of constraints this puts on existing infrastructure and blockchain protocol in terms of accommodating for this arrival of all of these agents trading, pushing transaction, pushing the block space limit probably, and execution loads. So yeah, are we set up to accommodate the agent wave, basically?
In the short term, I would hope yes, insofar as gas is the cheapest I have ever seen it, and I sometimes am a little worried and hoping that we'll get back to kind of full blocks and higher gas. But I do think in general, this kind of, well, Javon's paradox of like filling the space that there is to be filled is going to be even more the case if we have agents that will spin up to do such a thing, because I'm sure you can spin up a lot more agents than you can kind of, bring new people into crypto and like on the margins. As for the kind of automatic trading, I think that is something that I am excited to see play out. I think it won't be, well, in the near term, LLMs are still, faster than humans, but not as fast as high frequency trading. So I don't expect them to be doing, thousands of transactions on their own super fast, unless they're, I don't know, building their own type of algorithms.
I think so. I think they could, end up building their own bots and upgrading their own strategy. I mean, I guess we can see now that creativity is kind of the limit on what we could, have an agent do. And then maybe the next boundary to push is more on the infra side, and how do we support the all of the extra data propagation that is going to arrive. There's probably some concern also around memory, and maybe some specific attributes around decentralized memory. This is something that we've also been discussing internally at Optimum, although this is not, it's not a high product priority for us at this stage, but looking forward, it will be, we have to consider that probably most of the users of high performance, networks as it stands will be agents, and how do we best serve them? So yeah, no, that's an interesting topic. So Oisín, I know you have a demo for us. I wanted to jump into that and check out Obol Claw.
Yeah, sweet. I think any good piece of product chit chat comes better if you can like actually see it happen. So what I'm going to attempt to do right now is walk people through setting up the Obol stack, and maybe I can talk a bit through it. So there's a weird UI bug there that is a bit strange, but that rectifies itself after here. But what we're watching it do right now is set up the Obol stack. So the first thing it's doing is checking if we have all of the programs like kubectl to control Kubernetes, Helm is what you install applications with, K9s we're going to look at, which is how you kind of browse if things are working. You can see that it has Openclaw, and then it has this thing called Olama for local LLMs. So it sets up...
You have a local LLM, and you're also leveraging a cloud.
Correct.
Okay.
By default, we bundle a local LLM, or like it prompts you to install a local LLM. It knows that I already have one, so I didn't get this kind of yes or no, but you can obviously say no as well. But hold on a sec. So it sets up Kubernetes. You can see it setting up all of the skills for an Openclaw instance, and out of the box, yeah, it'll have a local LLM. These local LLMs are, not too bad to get started with something for free if you're patient. However, they need a decent amount of graphical memory, so that works better on Mac devices than it does on kind of Windows devices for the near term. But I would probably recommend for most people, it's still at the phase that you should add a remote kind of frontier large language model. So that can be your OpenAI API key, a Cloud Code API key. Soon we will have the ability to use third-party remote services. I won't name names until I can ship them, because sometimes I'm a little dubious about over-promising. But the idea being that, you can very quickly get started with an LLM. I think I can still hear you, Saj, but yeah. So that's kind of the plan. And then what we also set up beyond just a stock Openclaw is we give it an Ethereum RPC, which has mainnet, base, and testnet. And we also give it an empty wallet. So what you can see here set up so far is the network. So it has the 3 different networks. You can see a little bit about my disk, memory, how long this has been up, how much CPU load it's under. And you can see that to start, it's running on a Kyne 3.5B 4 billion model. So this is running locally on my machine. I can try and say hi, but it might take longer than I have the patience for, but I'll let it go and see what it takes. So that'll have a go. And then while I'm waiting for that to decide to answer me, I will prepare a remote model, because that will be more performant. But on this side, actually beforehand, to give it an extra bit of time, you can see what runs in the cluster by opening one of these tools it shows. So you can see here, there's like your RPC, your gateway for your large language models, Prometheus Grafana, the front end, your Openclaw, the private keys in a remote signer, and nothing else too exciting, some X402 endpoints for payments.
Right.
And then I am now going to give it a better API. So I'm going to give an Anthropic key, and that will restart it. In the interim, yeah, it hasn't necessarily decided to answer us so far. So I think it probably will now error, because it's going to be killed and restarted. But we can see sometimes from here. Yeah, okay. So yeah, you get an idea that even within a minute or two, a local model isn't quite fast enough to answer that. But now we should be good to refresh the page. And we should see that it's running on Claude if this all went to plan. Yeah. So
Nice.
now it's running on Claude. And now if I say, what model are you? It should be faster, not maybe insane. Oh, maybe I was a little too quick. As you can see, there's always some things to balance. Wait, give that a proper refresh. And then once that is refreshed and we can chat to it, I might do a little demo of letting it kind of read from the chain and do a bit of analysis, because that's the thing that I think is most unique about what we're kind of focusing on within the Openclaw space. You're probably aware that the founder of Openclaw hasn't exactly been thrilled with the kind of crypto community launching tokens and stuff around it. We haven't exactly...
I don't think we made a good impression on it.
No, not necessarily. So we're going to have to try and do some like real things to try and, claw it back. But yeah, what I have been very surprised. The Obol stack will give these Openclaw agents the ability to talk to a local RPC, well, a remote RPC, and you can add a local one, and it also gives a wallet. So if I say, I haven't tried this, and it might take a bit of time, but what?
And you have the remote signer as a skill as well. Like the agent can leverage that.
Yeah.
I think that's very cool, actually. Like just looking at it from a security standpoint and separation of concerns, that's very cool.
100%. The very first proof of concepts we did, you kind of give it a private key very locally, but that's a bit scary. You're afraid that it'll kind of get rid of it. So putting it in a remote signer makes it a bit easier insofar as if it downloads like a malware-based skill, that's not really going to immediately be able to, swipe the private key. It's not perfect in that, it can figure out, oh, I can just transfer out the assets, but that's a lot more difficult than kind of a generic crypto stealer that's designed to kind of rob, keys and secrets. They'd have to figure out what's in your address, transfer it out. You probably will still want multi-sigs. We can probably add better, controls and sanity checks on the remote signer to not just arbitrarily say yes to what it wants. But yeah, that is directionally, hopefully going the right direction. And similarly, because you run in Kubernetes and everything is in containers, you have more isolation than you might otherwise have. Like people normally are installing Openclaw on their host machine, and that's a bit scary. Putting it in a container will remove some, but not all of the risks that might be associated with it.
Right. I guess the best setup would be running the remote signer on a separate machine, not just like a different pod or something.
Yeah, exactly. I wonder, are we going to be here or not? Let's see. Don't know where those logs from earlier or later. I'll ask again. Sometimes just asking twice can.
This reminds me of the countless hours I spent with Openclaw last week.
Oh, nice. What was your most exciting or most concerning result of messing around with it?
Honestly, what was kind of a bummer is I spent 80% of my time initially just setting it up properly from a security perspective and like infra perspective, which is not even the most exciting part. But you tend to become a bit paranoid when you see out all the security flaws and like prompt injection and all that. So I was like, okay, I need to do this and that and that. And like only after many, many hours was I able to do the fun bootstrap thing and actually, have fun with it. But I guess that's the right way to do it. But it's just painful.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I have set up Openclaw a lot of times in the last while, and not actually I still don't have a permanent one that I intend to leave around. I have a machine sitting behind me that will be where it lives, but I'm too busy trying to do dev at the moment. But you can also open, as you might imagine, you've probably seen some of this before. So this is the actual Openclaw interface. So you have kind of access to more or less all of the usual things you can expect. Here we go.
Yeah, it's pretty cool that you have also UI for the Obol stack.
I need to do better on the SEO. I didn't quite find it from Optimum, the P2P project for Ethereum. We got to work on that, I think.
Interesting. Yeah.
Optimum.xyz.
I think that will be a nice one for Eli. Maybe because discoverable by agents.
Yeah, exactly. SEO for agents. But yeah, generally.
It's get Optimum. That's right. Let's see.
We're getting there. But yeah, that is the direction. Like one of the kind of major milestones we're trying to figure out is at what point we can let some Openclaws run a distributed validator. I think I'm pretty close insofar as this thing should soon be able to install a full node. It can install what we call it like a DV pod. There we go. We got there. We just needed to get a little bit
nice.
more backed.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So I guess so right now. So what's the next step on your roadmap with Obol Claw?
So one of the key focuses for us right now is this idea of like an Ethereum economy. So really trying to grow the amount of people that can sell and buy things on Ethereum. And further than that, as we kind of envisage AI agents and how they'll interact with Ethereum and the like wider crypto space, I'm a very big believer that if we have all of these agents and for the most part, all of what they're doing is spinning up stuff on AWS and Versal and Google, and maybe a micropayment hits Ethereum, not really as decentralized as I want, or like not the kind of Web3 vision I signed up for quite a while ago. What I would much rather is that these agents are able to host their own software, expose them directly to the internet from local, use things like IPFS or peer-to-peer based like messaging and memory, and just generally get more of an agent stack running locally, running in a decentralized fashion, and kind of growing the amount of Web3 services that are being used. And ideally, the value exchange lands on Ethereum itself. That's kind of the route we're going. And the kind of first MVP is to try and demonstrate that agents can sell and buy micropayments for services using X402 and 8004. So something like micropayments for an RPC or micropayments for an LLM inference, things like that.
Yeah. One thing that I would find very cool, I was thinking about, could agent just join a test net and like pay for their own infra and be like, oh, I'm going to run a node, I'm going to earn some rewards, some tokens, and just participate in like some protocol, some permissionless chain. I think that would be pretty cool.
Yeah, I think it's very feasible, especially if they can like spin up infrastructure. I think they'll be able to do a lot more than like, wallet is just step one. But because we're doing these Openclaw instances within a Kubernetes environment, we can give them the ability to spawn pretty much whatever they want to like kind of an enterprise grade fashion. So that's kind of where things will be going.
Yeah, and too early to say, but definitely on the Optimum side, we have these nodes that we call Flexnodes that can support any kind of services from helping propagate data to help store the data from a decentralized memory perspective, and the end goal is to have a marketplace where those Flexnodes are able to trade from each other the capacity, the type of RLNC equations that they might have and generate. And so there is a game theory there, because depending on where you are in the network, your location, the demand in that spot, it might be better for you to spin up a node there, because you're going to be able to contribute and help more the peers in that area, and thus, potentially increase some tips that you might get from users. And so, obviously, Flex nodes initially are designed for people to be operators, but I can see how what we've been discussing today could literally unlock, running Flex nodes for so many people, and definitely lowers the entry barrier to something like that.
Yeah, I definitely believe that, like, as you said, you're designing this for people for now, but very soon you'll be designing for people to tell their agent to go run it. I don't know.
Yeah. No, I was gonna say it goes pretty well together, because usually we're worried that with scaling we lose on the performance side. So you're like, oh yeah, we want to have like a very scalable network, but we want it very performant, and we want decentralization. And with Optimum, with the RNC technology, scaling actually helps performance. So that's a very nice property of this type of protocols, where the more nodes there are, the more participations there is, the better the performance for everyone. So it's kind of interesting that both from a sort of ecosystem trend and application trend, I think that there is a nice fit here between high performance protocols and agents arriving on chain.
100%. To that end, I was just testing there. One of the things I want to do is I dropped a bit of money into the agent's wallet, and I tried to convince it to send a transaction. And intriguingly, for the first time ever, it didn't like immediately do that for me. It was like, whoa, 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 what do you mean you want me to send all of my money? And then I was like, check it again. And I was like, okay, let me check. I have 13 cents in my mainnet wallet. I'm going to send a quarter to Vitalik. Vitalik can look up an ENS name.
He needs it.
Gas, not more than that. Send it anyways. But it's interesting that it can like, ask me to double check. It can be like, this will be very wasteful from a gas perspective.
Yeah, I mean, it can go both ways. I think that's where we are at the moment is definitely agent can help users, and it can also, like, if you don't have safeguards, it can go the other direction and just be like, I'm sending transaction everywhere, and it was not your intent, but like, how do you stop it? I think that story was from the director, a director at Meta that ended up having their inbox deleted and couldn't stop it. So yeah, we still have a bit of work, I guess. If you had a recommendation for people that are super interested by this intersection between crypto, Web3 in general, and AI, what would you tell them to focus on, let's say, for the next 90 days?
I think the first and foremost one would be trying to encourage people to actually use this technology and get like really hands-on with it, because sometimes I think if you only go off what you see on Twitter, you can be a bit misinformed as to how amazing and fantastic these are, and that they're not quite like completely changing the world as much as maybe some people will have you believe. And they also take a lot more like learning to get used to than I expect. The one I use a lot at the moment is like Claude Code for programming. And you always need to be chatting to people, like learning tips, and they say, oh, have you heard about plan mode? Have you heard about simplifying and batch? And there's like a remarkable amount of learning to get the most out of them. That'd be probably like the kind of basics. And then beyond that, I'm very intrigued by like skills at the moment, because I think they're very like portable, and they're how you can tell a lot of agents how to do something new. So we've been obviously making skills for reading from the chain, using ENS, talking about like Obol, but I also expect that there'll be skills for all sorts of like more exotic and more complicated use cases as they go forward, especially now as these skills are becoming more programmable. Like Openclaw allows you to run scripts. The OpenAI and the Claude codes previously did not, but now I believe Claude Code is also allowing you to have like programmable tools. So these are, Python programs wrapped around kind of API calls. So they really are getting particularly powerful in terms of what, things are out there. And I think in general, I'd say just don't write off any tech when you first use it, because 6 months later, it's often much better than when you like tried it. I've spoken to someone who was like, up until about January this year, not really on board with like AI development. I was like, okay, if I'm doing something like really prototypey, like my rule was you can't complain about it being wrong if you got AI to do it. But now in the most recent models, as of kind of January, February, it's like I'm reevaluating that and kind of having to accept that Claude Opus is a better programmer than I am at this point, and like I'd have to accept that and figure out what does that mean for the future of shipping products.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, that's very good advice. Great. Well, thank you for your time, and excited to see next steps for Obol Claw, and hoping to work on something together. Maybe we'll find a cool way to leverage Obol Claw stack in the context of Optimum.
Yeah, I think even before then, we're keen early kind of users and trial and errors in terms of MUM P2P and the kind of Flexnode stack. I'm particularly keen to start putting that as a sidecar along with our node operators to see if that can really improve the performance of their beacon nodes and thus earn them more money as validators, which is very important in my line of work. Everyone wants to max
that
their.
could be another skill.
Yeah, and maybe if Eli, before we finish, ends the recording, could you just put up my screen again? I think it might be a nice conclusion to show that my agent was successfully able to dust Vitalik's wallet with the money I gave it. So it managed that after a bit of negotiation.
Nice. You had to convince your agent to send money to Vitalik.
I did, yeah. He didn't want to do it first time around, but we got there.
Very nice. Well, thank you.
Okay, thank you.